Hello, I'm so excited to be with you all today. Thank you so much for joining us. First, let me introduce myself and then I'll introduce our two amazing guests today. My name is Sandra Abravaya, and I have been living as a caregiver with a spouse who has been fighting an terminal neurodegenerative disease called ALS and have, through my experience, learned a lot about ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and this whole category of neurodegenerative diseases that so many of us are struggling with day in and day out. And so many of us are trying to live our best lives in spite of these really challenging circumstances. So we thought it would be helpful if today we could share with you from the vantage point of two real national leaders in Parkinson's research and care. And hopefully, this is valuable for patients, for caregivers, for families. And we're here to support. We are here to provide care. Let me start by introducing Dr. Liz Ferluga, who I have the great pleasure of getting to be colleagues with because we both work at a company called Synapticure. And Synapticure really is available to families in all 50 states to provide neurology care, specifically Parkinson's care, movement disorder specialty care for patients and caregivers anywhere in the country, affordably, accessibly, from your own home via virtual care. And so when my husband and I started this effort, we felt so blessed to recruit Dr. Liz Verluga to lead the Parkinson's practice. If you go to the Synapticure website, you will see over 300 reviews on Liz and what an incredible Parkinson's physician she is. So, just a real treasure for the community in every way. Excited to hear from her today. And so excited to introduce you to Dr. Ray Dorsey, who has asked that we go by Ray on this call. Ray has been a long-time friend and advisor to Synapticure. And when we first decided to start the company and to provide care to families dealing with these neurodegenerative diseases, Ray was at ground zero helping us think about what kind of care we wanted to deliver and needed to deliver and what kind of supports the Parkinson's community really needed. And so he's been an advisor, a source of inspiration and support. He's published multiple books about Parkinson's. He's a leading researcher. He's a thought leader. The Parkinson's Plan is an amazing book that he will talk about today, among so many other topics. So without further ado, thank you so much, Dr. Ray Dorsey Ray and Dr. Liz Ferluga, for being here today to talk about how we help families living with Parkinson's. And I will start by turning it over to Dr. Ferluga.
Okay. Well, thank you for the warm introduction. And thank you, Ray, for joining us today. And happy Parkinson's Awareness Month. Part of the goal today is to give people some direction over what they can do in their everyday lives that can help them live better with Parkinson's. So, things that I get questioned every day really is, how do we stay healthy? What can I do to slow my disease down? And what kind of lifestyle changes can I make? And we're going to answer those today. So, Ray, I think the first thing, you are definitely a renowned expert kind of in the environmental impact and how the environment relates to Parkinson's disease. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so first of all, delighted to be with you, Liz. I can't go without saying the course of ALS, the course of Parkinson's disease is in the hands of people who are most directly affected by it. And no one in the ALS community, I think, is doing more to change the course of ALS for people who have it and for people who won't get it in the future than Sandra and Brian Wallet. They've been doing this in a selfless way for a decade, 7 years, 8 years, have provided a voice for people with ALS who've largely been robbed of that voice by the disease and I think by the healthcare system in many ways. and they're trying to change the course of this disease, not only for Brian, but for everyone with ALS. And their generosity knows a few limits. They're not satisfied with just tackling ALS. They're trying to tackle Parkinson's disease. These are unnatural diseases. These diseases are largely man-made. These diseases were first described in 1817 for Parkinson's, 1869 first major description of ALS. These are diseases that are tied to the environment. These are diseases that are preventable. These are diseases that are robbing people of their independence, robbing people of their voice, robbing people of their money, robbing people of their time. These diseases need to end. Synapticure, I Am ALS, and many others are working really hard to reduce the burden and to end these diseases in our generation. And I can't be happier to be working with Sandra and Brian and you on trying to do exactly that. So now, if you have Parkinson's disease, what can you do to change the course of it? I think there are three things you can do to change the course of Parkinson's disease. The first, if chemicals are underlying the principal driver of the disease, only 13% of people carry a genetic cause or genetic risk factor to the disease, 87% of Americans don't. Then the principal causes are in our environment. These things are contributing to the rise of it. And if you avoid getting exposed to these chemicals after you've been diagnosed, you can slow your rate of progression of the disease. Dr. Beata-Ritz at UCLA showed that people who already have Parkinson's disease, who are exposed to pesticides after their diagnosis, have a faster rate of progression on almost every domain that they measure. So if you have Parkinson's disease, stop getting exposed to pesticides, buy organic, get a water filter, especially if you're getting well water. Get a water filter today if you have a well. Stop being exposed, reduce your exposure to air pollution, and air purifiers alike can do that. So that's what we put in our book, Parkinson's 25. We're happy to talk more about that. Second thing you need to do is you need to sweat. So you got to exercise if you have Parkinson's disease, research every day, every week, every month. You know this better than I do, Liz. Comes out with the health benefits of exercising for Parkinson's disease. I routinely recommend my patients at least an hour a day. And that if I had Parkinson's, I say I would do 2 hours a day. And the third is to get really good care. Only 9% of people with Parkinson's disease see a Parkinson's specialist. 40% of people with Parkinson's disease do not see neurologists of any kind. And those individuals are more likely to fracture their hip, more likely to be placed in a skilled nursing facility, and more likely to die prematurely. We know that good care improves outcomes for Parkinson's disease. Synapticure and others are trying to bring that care to people instead of people to care. It's kind of odd that we ask people with ALS who have impaired mobility, people with Parkinson's disease who have impaired driving ability to drive to see specialists like me on my terms. We should be bringing specialist care to people on their terms in their homes. And that's what Synapticure is trying to do. So three things to change the course of disease. One, stop getting exposed to these chemicals that are fueling the rise of disease for Parkinson's and ALS. Two, exercise for Parkinson's disease at least an hour a day. And three, get really good care. Synapticure is one way to do that. There are other ways to do that. I have a small financial institution, Synapticure, been an advisor, but there are lots of ways to do that. But getting really good care improves your health outcomes.
No, that's great. So the first thing you said was about pesticides. Another thing that came up in your book a lot is about dry cleaning. And can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so it turns out that dry cleaning chemicals, yes, dry cleaning chemicals are associated with a 500% increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease. These are the same chemicals that were in Camp Lejeune, which was contaminated with these chemicals, which are also known to cause cancer and also linked to ALS. I get really, really concerned that these chemicals, which are widely used to dry clean clothes and to degrease metal, are fueling the rise of Parkinson's. In our book, I said for the US, it might be the most important cause of the disease. And I really worry about it for ALS. Is now that if you serve in the military and you develop ALS, it's considered a presumptive condition. And it's ALS appears not only to be high among veterans, at least twice as high, it appears to be higher among people working in the Air Force. And I think Air Force uses a ton of this chemical trichloroethylene, TCE, 6 atoms, 2 carbons in black, 1 hydrogen white, 3 chlorines in blue, hence its name trichloroethylene. I think that's underlying a lot of people who are developing ALS, especially veterans. So you're going to get a green dry cleaner. Get a green dry cleaner that does not use trichloroethylene or perchloroethylene. It's often abbreviated PERC in the dry cleaning industry. So ask your dry cleaner if they use perp, and if they do, find a different dry cleaner. Turns out men's shirts tend to be laundered and washed with water, and so don't need dry cleaning chemicals. So avoid these dry cleaning chemicals.
I also thought it was very interesting in your book that you talked about not only just getting clothes dry cleaned, but the location of where dry cleaners are, like to your store, to your residency, to your residence, to like your kids' schools. Can you explain a little bit about how that works with the TCE?
Yeah, so I've been doing a listening tour since our book came out, visiting I think 40 plus cities in the last 6 months. And I went to San Antonio. Sandra, who did I meet in San Antonio?
Juan Reyes.
Juan Reyes, outstanding. He has served his country in the military and like many veterans developed ALS. 80 people in San Antonio, Texas, where Juan Reyes is. 80 people developed ALS, all living around an Air Force base that was contaminated with trichloroethylene. 80 people developed ALS, and we're not answering questions to why they got it and what they can do to slow the rate of progression. I think this is a failure of neurologists like me, that we have not been awakened to the disproportionate number of people being exposed to chemicals known to cause cancer according to the EPA, linked to Parkinson's disease, linked to ALS, and we're letting people suffer needlessly with a disease that's fundamentally preventable for the vast majority of people. We should prevent people like Juan Reyes. We should prevent veterans around the country from getting Parkinson's disease, like Dr. Sarah Whittingham, like Dr. Jana Reed, and prevent people from getting ALS, like Juan Reyes, as a result of their service. Many of these military sites, unfortunately, like Camp Lejeune, but there are dozens of others across the country that are contaminated with trichloroethylene, which not only puts members who live on that base at risk or have worked with that chemical at risk, but puts the entire community surrounding it, like in San Antonio, at risk for developing it. I had never even conceived that you could have a cluster of 80 people with ALS, and that's going on in San Antonio. And I don't think we've adequately supported that community. As you know, I'm really passionate about trying to prevent people from getting this disease in the future. What I'd like to do is put Synapticure out of business so people don't get Parkinson's disease, so they don't get ALS.
All for that. Unfortunately, it looks like I'm going to be in business for a while with the estimates of the increase. But just changing gears a little bit into other ways to be proactive. You said the number two thing was sweating. So let's kind of transition into that. Do you have certain exercises that you recommend for your patients to do? Because that's one of the questions I get is like, you told me to exercise, but what kind of exercise?
I think you get to pick it. So there are studies that have linked everything from ballroom dancing to non-contact boxing to yoga to Tai Chi to swimming to health benefits for Parkinson's disease. Enough to get your heart rate up is usually what we think about. So that's why a little bit of sweat, check with your cardiologist or internist, make sure you're fine to do so. But you get to pick it. It can be a social one. So a lot of people are doing, rock steady boxing. People do dance for Parkinson's disease. And many of these things, just like Synapticure, are available online. So you don't have, there are rock steady boxing studios throughout the country, but you don't have to live near one. There is Dance for Parkinson's Disease in Brooklyn, not too far from where I am. Shout out to David Leventhal, but you can participate online. So you can get access to exercise programs that are among the best in the country, best in the world, and to do that online. And just like you can get access to great neurologists like you through Synapticure, you can do that all online. So it's really hard to get the care that you need, but Michael Oken, Boss Bloom, and I say, you can create your own Parkinson's disease dream team. Create your own Parkinson's disease care dream team. Piece together care from you through Synapticure, Dance for Parkinson's disease with David Leventhal in Brooklyn, do rock steady boxing, get your voice therapy with the Parkinson's Voice Project in Dallas, or the Lee Silverman Voice Technique. Much of this is available online. Some of these services are free. Some of the best services for Parkinson's disease, some of the best services for ALS in the country are available for free. They made it this way as a pay it forward model. If you don't have the financial means, and we know lots of people with Parkinson's disease and ALS are paying a lot of money, losing a lot of money because of the disease itself. These services are increasingly, many of them are making them available for free. So create your own Parkinson's care dream team, create your own ALS dream team. Synapticure can be one piece of that puzzle, but there are lots of other ways to bring other pieces to you instead of you to them.
I'm going to give a couple plugs too. So, of course, Davis Phinney Foundation, amazing. They have pedaling for Parkinson's disease. And that's another way that people can do their exercise. And I often, Ray, to your point, I tell people find an activity that you love and go after it. And Davis Phinney is also doing a lot of pickleball. So I'm hearing all people about their pickleball adventures and tournaments. I think that's great. Where I live locally, we do a lot of rock steady boxing, pedaling for Parkinson's. And I think for me, I think that people who are in these exercise classes can be very inspirational and help motivate each other. And I think that social connection is really important. And we also here locally have a singing group called the Trembling Troubadours, who are amazing. So I'll just give them a little shout out too. They're at the Hickson, Tennessee Y. I think they meet on Fridays.
So shout out to Davis Finney. The first stop on
Yes.
our listening tour was to Denver, Colorado, because Polly Dawkins invited me to come out, I think days before our book came out. I had the great opportunity to bike ride with Polly Dawkins, Davis Finney, and Connie Carpenter Finney, who is the first woman, I think one of the only women, to win Olympic gold medals in two different sports. So I went bike riding with them. I kept up with them. They didn't ditch me, but they were kind enough to give me a little pedal assist. They didn't need the pedal assist, but I did to keep up with them. So a shout out to the Davis Finney Foundation.
One of the questions that I think we got answered with the COVID pandemic was what happens when people stop exercising? What's your experience been there when they were doing their exercise and then they stop it?
You know that, listen, there are people who are in better physical shape today with Parkinson's disease than they were when they had Parkinson's, before they had Parkinson's. If that isn't evidence that exercise is disease modifying, I'm not sure what is. People who are in better physical shape after their diagnosis than they were before. Unfortunately, if you stop exercising, the benefits appear to wane. And they do. And listen, it's not easy to have Parkinson's. It's really hard to have ALS. And it's not easy to exercise. So I don't say this lightly, and I hate Parkinson's disease and I hate ALS, but the best way to treat Parkinson's disease is exercise. And it's one that has the fewest side effects and one of the lowest cost interventions. And it provides benefits not only for the present term, but for the future term. So if you're doing reasonably well with your Parkinson's disease right now, I always say you exercise today to benefit your future self.
Absolutely. So my experience during COVID was a lot of people couldn't go to their exercise classes. And I saw people like advance within that time period. And then when they were able to go back to their exercise classes, I saw them improve again. So it was kind of like another little mini experiment in a way where we saw the importance of moving. It's like you move it or you lose it, right? And I think that we have to also remember it's not just about the disease progression for Parkinson's disease. We know it modifies things like for cognitive health, for mental health. And I think just them understanding that it's not just motor, it's everything for your brain health.
And you just made a great point. There are studies that suggest that exercise is as effective, if not in some cases more effective than antidepressants are for depression, for example. So lots of reasons for people with Parkinson's disease to exercise.
Since we were talking about your little bicycle trip, hopefully you wore your helmet. Can you
Of course, yeah, I
comment?
wear my helmet.
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
6'5". I wear a helmet walking down the streets of New York.
there you go.
Joking, no, I'm joking.
Can you talk a little bit about like head trauma risk factors and ways to kind of prevent that?
Look, let's talk about the similarities. Parkinson's and ALS, both first described in the 1800s, one in England, one in France, both within 50 years of one another, both extraordinarily rare before the 1800s, both hard to imagine that anyone who's seen someone with Parkinson's, especially untreated Parkinson's, and someone with ALS, it's hard to imagine that doctors missed a lot of people with these conditions before the 1800s. There are rare descriptions of Parkinson's in China and India, and Egyptian, but they're rare. Just like there are rare primary genetic causes of it. But only 15% of people with 13% of people with Parkinson's carry a genetic risk factor. Only 10 to 15% of people with ALS can carry a genetic risk factor for the disease. So the vast majority are sporadic, or I would say due to environmental causes. So what are these environmental causes? At the top of the list is head trauma. For both these diseases, not top of the list. One of the things that both list is head trauma. Others are pesticides. We talked about the dry cleaning, degreasing chemicals, and heavy metals and air pollution. But head trauma is on the list for both. It's hard, I don't think it's terribly surprising that repeated concussions increases your risk of both disease. I think that a concussion with loss of consciousness increases your risk of Parkinson's by about 50%. It appears that there are environment interactions that underlie the disease. So, for example, people who have concussion and are exposed to pesticides have a heightened risk of getting Parkinson's disease. I think the same is likely true in ALS. I know that literature less well. There's quite frankly, there's less literature there, a shortcoming. But yes, if you have Parkinson's, avoid head trauma. If you have ALS, avoid head trauma, because it's unlikely to be of any benefit. So if you like to ski or to bike, wear a helmet.
Another thing that often comes up is nutrition. Like, what should we be eating?
You should be eating food free of pesticides. So pesticides were created largely in World War II. Many of them were designed to damage the nervous system of insects. It's not terribly surprising that if you have chemicals that are designed to damage the nervous system of insects, that those chemicals might have adverse consequences for the nervous system of humans. And numerous studies link certain pesticides, paraquat, chlorpyrifos, organochlorine pesticides like DDT, to Parkinson's disease and to ALS. So buy organic if you can, and then wash your fruits and vegetables. Regardless of, I wash my organic ones with water. I use a little bit of vegetable wash because I worry about fat-loving pesticides. Your brain and your nerve cells are generally covered by fat. And so I worry about these things either getting into the brain or crossing membranes like in your gut for Parkinson's, or membranes like your skin for ALS. So buy organic, wash your fruits and vegetables, and then well water. 40 million Americans get their water from a well. These wells tend to be in rural areas, tend to be nearby farms that use pesticides. Pesticides can contaminate the groundwater, pollute your well, especially if your well is shallow. And these wells are not regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act. And they're infrequently tested. And when they're tested, they're usually tested for bacteria, so you don't get diarrhea. Fantastic. But they're not tested for, generally tested for pesticides, which are linked to both Parkinson's and ALS. So a water filter, carbon filter, if you're on a well, and you can test your water. There are companies that do this. There are municipalities that offer water testing as well. So avoid pesticides, and you're not spraying pesticides in your yard or in your home. You are not spraying nerve toxins on your yard or in your home. By the time you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, 60% of your dopamine producing nerve cells have died off. We're protecting the remaining 40%.
What about dairy?
So I get worried about dairy because I get worried that when you eat a cow, you're eating what the cow ate. And cows that are fed grains or, it's like cows are supposed to eat grass, but we sometimes don't feed them grass, but other corn and things like that. I worry about pesticides being on that feed for the cow. And what does the cow do with a fat-loving chemical? Well, it can't pee it out. It's hard to do so because you have to be a water-loving chemical. If you're a fat-loving chemical, you either get concentrated in the cow's fat or in the cow's milk. And you get put there in higher concentrations. So by the time humans eat it, like in milk or cheese, they're getting a higher exposure to the pesticide. So there are several studies that suggest high milk consumptions associated with an increased risk of Parkinson's disease. And there's this great study in Hawaii by Dr. Caroline Tanner and Webster Ross, showing that cows who were fed a fat-loving pesticide called heptachlor concentrated that in their milk, leading to a milk recall in Hawaii. People who were high milk consumers in Hawaii were more likely to get Parkinson's. When they looked at the brains of the high milk consumers after they died, they had lost more cells that produce dopamine in the brain, and they had the residue of the pesticide heptachlor in their brain. So if you have Parkinson's, if you have ALS, you're avoiding an ongoing exposure to pesticides. We want to slow the rate of progression of both diseases. One way to do that is likely to stop getting exposed to pesticides.
I was just gonna say that I remember the first time Ray came to our house and he was like, "What is this lawn care sign? What are they putting on your lawn? Treat it." And I literally like picked up the phone while Ray was sitting there in our backyard and I was like canceling lawn service. Like I just don't want any of that, right, around us. So sorry, go ahead, Liz.
No, look, there are reasons. Why are 1 in 31 8-year-old children in the United States getting autism? Well, we routinely spray kids' schools and playgrounds with pesticides. Why are soccer players have a higher risk of ALS? Well, we routinely spray sports fields with pesticides. There are reasons. Diseases have causes. That's a central tenet of Western medicine. Diseases have causes. Our job as neurologists, Liz and my job, is to figure out what the causes of these diseases are so we can prevent them, so we can slow them, so we can treat them, and so we can cure them. We want to cure ALS. We want to cure Parkinson's disease. The first step to curing a disease is to know what its cause is. When we figured out that hepatitis was due to hepatitis C, we now have an antibiotic that people can take a pill and we can cure hepatitis C. We figured out that bleeding stomach ulcers were not due to stress, but due to a bacteria. We give you an antibiotic and no one dies of bleeding ulcers. Much rarer to die of bleeding ulcers. When you find the cause for a disease, you can prevent it for your children, your grandchildren. You can make it so your friends and family members aren't affected by these terrible diseases. You can slow it by stopping exposure to these chemicals. We know that smokers who stop smoking or have a slower rate of progression of lung cancer. We can treat it more effectively and we can cure it.
I guess I was going to say that I think for our caffeine lovers out there, there are some good news about that, right?
Yeah, so caffeine, you might know this better than I do, caffeine is protective to nerve cells in the brain. Why don't you tell us more? You know more than I do about this, I suspect.
Well, I mean, I do love some caffeine, but it is definitely recommended for people to drink coffee or anything that's caffeine containing. Not only does it help with wakefulness and combat some of the side effects of our Parkinson's meds, there does seem to be less risk factor for people who actually consume caffeine. So I think that's a good thing for all of us to know
And
about.
just,
That's
and there's
okay.
no free lunch, it's fantastic, but I always put a little caveat that it can cause headaches and anxiety, so um,
Point taken.
fantastic. But if you enjoy your caffeinated coffee, this is another reason to enjoy your caffeinated coffee.
Another thing that often comes up is about supplements. And I know it's a loaded question. I don't know if there's anything that you have as a general recommendation or an avoidant, something you should avoid.
So listen, I think most neurologists, you and I are trained, like supplements is a bad word, chelation is a bad word, all these things are bad words. I'm now in a new organization that's focused on trying to prevent disease, move healthcare from reactive sick care
Hmm.
to proactive preventive care. And I have the pleasure of sitting next to a naturopathic doctor, Dr. Rob Kochko, who's really outstanding. And he's been teaching me about these things. And it's funny, naturopathic doctors, they do like 4 years of medical school. They don't have a traditional residency like we do. Their whole orientation is to try to find out the cause of diseases. And so if you read their little section on Parkinson's disease, it doesn't talk about levodopa so much. It talks about what are the environmental causes of Parkinson's, and then what can you do to address these environmental causes. There's things like N-acetylcysteine and glutathione, which are being studied. My colleague, Dr. Dan Kremens, another colleague, I'll get her name in a second, have been studying this. I think there's promise in studying these things. I think these things are under-evaluated. I shared with Sandra recently that Dr. Bud Brolin, who is, I think, the only person to chair the Department of Neurology at Columbia University and the Department of Neurology at the University of Pennsylvania, showed that chelation in people who had ALS due to lead poisoning, chelation, and he reported that chelation helped a patient of his with ALS due to lead poisoning. I think we need to be a little bit more open-minded to these alternative approaches, and I think we need to study them in a more rigorous manner so we can come up with alternative ways to treat these terrible conditions.
Do you have any now? There's an FDA warning on carbidopa
Laura Mishley, by
levodopa.
the way, Dr. Laura Mishley, outstanding shout out. FDA
Yeah,
warning, I'm sorry.
about the B6 deficiency, and that could be caused by carbidopa levodopa.
They're talking like vitamin D deficiency.
B6,
B6, yeah. Well,
the B6.
you know more than I do, so you tell us about the.
So it's the, to my understanding, that carbidopa levodopa can block the metabolism and the uptake of B6. And there's now a new FDA warning on all carbidopa levodopa products regarding this. And when people are especially deficient, they can actually have refractory seizures, which is pretty rare. But because of that, they have put this warning. So it's been coming up more in patient visits. And one thing that, as a movement disorder specialist, I'm trying to kind of figure out is who are the right people to screen, or should we be screening everybody?
Yeah, and I'd say the main issue here is around neuropathy numbness. Michael
Yeah,
Hogan wrote the book with me. He says that everyone on levodopa should be on a multivitamin or B complex vitamin. I think that's the way to
right.
do that. You know, I cared for hundreds, if not thousands, of people with Parkinson's disease. I can probably count on one hand, and I use levodopa almost all the time.
Yep.
I can count on one hand the number of people that have had a seizure. So I think, have you had anyone have a seizure with Parkinson's disease? Okay, so that's one. So
I have
I think,
literally an N of one right after this thing came out. It kind of all
so,
clicked together. So it has become more of an interesting kind of
so I think the
idea.
main issue here is neuropathy. I don't think we need to get too, it's not
Yeah.
like, not huge alarm bells, but this is again, preventable, addressable, with the simple, multivitamin.
You talked about this a little bit already, but kind of establishing your care team. Like, do you have recommendations on who should be on your care team? How do you go about doing this as a patient trying to navigate our complex world of neurology?
Listen, we spend one out of every $5 on sick care in the United States, and that care is inaccessible. We spend one out of every $5 of the wealthiest nation on sick care, and that care is inaccessible to most people. So if you live near the University of Florida and you can get an appointment at the University of Florida in Gainesville and see Dr. Oken and his outstanding team, fantastic, do that. But unfortunately, most people with Parkinson's disease live in suburban and rural areas that aren't near Parkinson's centers of excellence. So in those cases, you have to create your own team. And I know this is terrible. It's odd that I'm here, I am a neurologist and I'm telling people with a bad neurological disorder, Parkinson's and ALS, that they have to add to their burden by creating their own care team. But I think unfortunately, the state of healthcare in the United States is such that we have to put the onus on people to create their own care team and make their voices heard. So you can find great specialists at Synapticure. You can find other people that are offering care via telemedicine. Some major medical centers offer that care, so you can get that way. You can get speech therapy through the Parkinson's Voice Project. You can get exercise through Davis Finney Foundation, Dance for Parkinson's Disease, Rock Steady Boxing. You can get naturopathic care from Dr. Lori Mishley and others. You can get physical therapists or exercise coaches that can come to your home. You can get nutritional advice and counseling from nutritionists across the country. I don't know if Synapticure offer. I think you guys offer nutritional counseling.
We
Not yet.
yeah, we
Not
do.
yet. But these
Yeah,
are the
no, and I
types of.
think to your no, I think to your point, Ray, that is the problem that my husband and I encountered after many years living with a neurodegenerative disease, is that we saw ourselves as very privileged to be in that category of patients and caregivers who lived close to a health system that could see us, albeit with a very long wait time. And we saw that that care was not accessible to the vast majority of people in this country. And all of the work that is required to put together your care team, it's not just about finding your neurologist that you can get an appointment with if you live in a rural or suburban area. It's about putting together all those pieces. And by and large, I have found that that work has fallen on me as the caregiver. So when we launched Synapticure, we thought, how do we democratize care? How do we make care accessible and affordable to people in every state in the country? And how do we create a care model that takes the burden off of the caregiver and the patient and pieces it all together? Because Synapticure knows about all of these resources, right? We have you as an advisor. Dr. Ferluga has been a longtime leader in the Parkinson's sector, and we have such a wonderful community where we don't want patients and caregivers to have to piece it together. We want to support them both with a physician and with a care coordinator at Synapticure who does that piecing together for you. They help you find the right person to come to your house for OT or PT. They help you find the right resource to do SLT in your home. They help you make decisions about nutrition. And so all of that burden is off of the caregiver and the patient.
I mean, 100%. I don't know what else to say to that. I would say from my perspective, the team, I think all personally, I know it might be impossible, but all Parkinson's patients should see a movement disorder specialist once a year, and just to take a look, at least once a year, just to take a look at their medications. And even if that's a telemedicine appointment or if it's in person, it does not matter. I think it's just that way they can be educated about what are the new exercise recommendations. Are there any new research things coming down the pipeline? And like, I think those are very important for all of our patients to know about.
Okay, I can't let either of you go, even though we just have a few minutes left, without talking about sleep. Can we talk about sleep?
Oh, I love me some sleep. Sleep. So I think was it the Fox Insight study? They found that 98% of Parkinson's patients have sleep issues. So sleep disorders are super common in Parkinson's disease. Often REM behavior disorder, where people are yelling out, kicking, punching in their sleep, will precede it by decades. But then there's also things like restless leg syndrome, periodic limb movements of sleep, sleep apnea. They have disturbances because they can't roll over in bed correctly. They have pain. They have all these things are problematic for them. And we do know that from a brain health perspective, sleep's really important. And I'll throw that to Ray about explaining that.
So, a shout out, a lot of people who have linked these environmental chemicals to Parkinson's disease and to ALS are women. Ava Feldman, University of Michigan, Caroline Tanner, University of California, San Francisco. The person who's identified the health benefits of sleep is a woman. Dr. Megan Neerdegard, a colleague of mine at University of Rochester, spends a lot of time in Europe as well, who showed that we have a system in our brain called the glymphatic system that's responsible for flushing out misfolded proteins and toxicants that are in our brain. What do Parkinson's disease and ALS share in common? They both have a lot of misfolded protein, and they both are likely principally due to environmental toxicants. And so sleep is really good for flushing out these misfolded proteins and for flushing out these toxicants. They can be helpful for people to prevent these diseases in likelihood, and are helpful for people who already have the disease.
When I hear feedback about people just raving about seeing you, Dr. Ferluga, for appointments, so much of what they're talking about is the symptom management, right? Because you're titrating their meds, you're helping them sort of optimize their sleep, just things that are really improving their quality of life. And because you're so readily available and so easily accessible, it just allows them to improve their quality of life so much faster than if they had to wait for appointments for months or drive long distances to health systems. So, I mean, maybe as we wrap up, we can share just a bit for our audience about ways in which we support families, the kinds of sort of the most frequently asked questions and areas where you end up leaning in that maybe are not obvious to people. So many of them, I think, in these topic areas that we've learned from Ray on today.
I think a lot of what I do, honestly, is patient education. And some of the stuff that is the most affects quality of life the most are non-motor symptoms. And those things include things like sleep, mood disorders, cognitive, psychosis. A lot of times we as providers don't and physicians don't have time in traditional clinics to ask all those questions or create, patients are scared to tell us these things are going on. So we have to kind of make that therapeutic alliance so that they feel more open and understand that this is part of the disease or the medications that we're giving them so that they feel comfortable letting us know. So a lot of my focus is on non-motor symptoms. I often kid that I am obsessed with pooping and blood pressure because some people don't realize that if you don't go to the bathroom, your meds don't work right. And about the correlation with fatigue and weakness and freezing and low blood pressure and how that can change with what kind of medications you get. So that's a couple of the things that I spend a lot of time with education.
There are over 30 million Americans who care for another adult with a disability. The number one reason for that, I think, are neurological disorders, including Parkinson's, ALS, and Alzheimer's disease. And people with those diseases obviously have their health impacted, but caregivers have worse health outcomes than people who aren't caregiving. And I think, I haven't paid enough attention to the health of care partners and caregivers and the patients I care for. Perhaps, focused on the patient. But I think we need to do more to support those who are supporting people with this disease. And so there's lots of ways to do that. Listening it will be chief among them. More fundamentally, the healthcare system is not working. If we're spending $1 out of $5 on sick care and people can't access care, if the prevalence of ALS is rising, if Parkinson's is now what was once a rare disease in 1817 is now the world's fastest growing brain disease, where 1 in 31 children have autism in this country, these are all unnatural. It is not natural that brain diseases are the world's leading source of disability. That's unnatural. It's not natural that 1 in 3 85-year-olds have Alzheimer's disease. That's unnatural. We need to find out what the environmental causes of these diseases are and work really, really, really hard to prevent them so we can slow the rate of progression for those who are already affected and prevent these diseases from happening. We're spending billions, trillions of dollars on healthcare for conditions that are fundamentally preventable. We can save our society, we can save Medicare, we can save Medicaid, lots of money by preventing these diseases. And we can prevent suffering for people like Sandra, for people like Brian Wallet, for people that we care for, that Liz cares for every day by preventing these diseases from ever happening. We live in a world largely free of polio. We live in a world where lead poisoning is much less common. We live in a world where HIV is falling, not rising. All these things are happening because people made their voices heard and have focused on trying to prevent these diseases. We have no polio treatment centers. There's no Synapticure for polio. There's no polio support groups. There's no polio pharmaceutical companies. There's just no polio in the vast majority of the world. Let's make it so that there's just no ALS in the vast majority of the world, that there's no Parkinson's in the vast majority of the world.
Thank you both for a very hopeful conversation where, as we think about what will prevent these diseases, we're also surfacing key action items and lifestyle choices that people living today with Parkinson's can make to live a better life, which is, at the end of the day, all we want as caregivers, myself as a caregiver, seeing my husband suffer so much. How can I help him suffer less, live a better life? Thank you so much, Ray. Thank you so much, Dr. Ferluga, for helping us share with patients and caregivers how they can live a better life with Parkinson's. So grateful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.